Hello and welcome to part 7 of my course, Build a Geothermal Greenhouse in Your Backyard. I'm Alex Smith, host of Radio EcoShock as broadcast on 100 non-profit radio stations in 4 countries. You can get the show free online at www.ecoshock.org. In this session, I will use photos and videos that explore what it takes to get growing plants through a tough Canadian winter in a geothermal greenhouse. I install a wood stove with a water barrel. I try heated beds. I build insulated shutters for the wall glass and show an affordable heat pump. Somehow I managed to keep everything alive during final construction. These were the trials of winter. Step 1 was the wood stove. For such a small greenhouse, I chose a Camp Chef wood stove. It's affordable and it's light enough I can lift it. It fits in a tiny corner. The price is around $300 US. And that includes the stovepipe as well. The stove has lasted these 3 years with just a little rust on the top, and I could have stopped that by putting plastic over the stove in the off-season. I will show you videos measuring the heat with the heat gun during and long after a fire. Camp Chef sells an optional water heater for the stove. Don't buy that. It's very small and it's meant for use melting snow in tents. Don't buy it for the greenhouse. But I needed more than that. I needed something to last into the night. So I traded a neighbor for a 20-gallon or 75-liter barrel and mounted it on a metal grate over the wood stove. Water in the barrel captured and held heat long into the night, saving electric energy. I recommend this method. You would think heating the plant roots should help in super cold conditions. In many plants, if the roots survive, they will regenerate. You can find relatively inexpensive heating cable meant for greenhouses. I tried it and the cable failed within a month. Maybe I just needed better commercial quality heating cable. Nobody carried that in British Columbia, and I found out why. When I called an agribusiness distributor in Alberta, even with their heavier in-ground heating cables, they had so many failed in return they stopped selling them. For me, this technology is not good yet. It did not take many sub-zero nights to realize the glass walls would not hold in enough heat, even though they were double-paned and had curtains on them. Curtains turned out to be just a pain because they ended up behind the plants, making them hard to open and close. I only use curtains when trying to spare the neighbors some bright lights or to fend off a hot summer sun for a few hours. The cheap blackout curtains sold at Walmart were not much good. I don't recommend them. I built plywood shutters with foam insulation, and those work really well. That's the way to go. In general, whether it's insulating the roof or covering the walls, I found it works best to put the covering on the outside of the building. And that's good because I have a small building. Hanging the plastic inside for the roof failed for me. It creates temperature differences, leading to condensation up above, and that eventually cools and collapses the plastic. When temperatures went as low as -35, in desperation I put 4 old comforters on the roof. Previously I had bought a garbage bag of tattered comforters for $5 at a thrift store. Climbing up the little ladder built onto the roof, I laid down the comforters on glass, cleared of snow, and taped them in place. Then I pulled 2 large tarpaulins over the roof and comforters, the biggest one covering the whole greenhouse right down to the ground. On those nights, I basically had an insulated shed. It worked. To my surprise, the old comforters never even got wet during the winter. When the cold snap was over, I left comforters over the northern half of the roof and pulled back the tarps to let in the weak sun on the south half on bright days. Maybe we can think of something more elegant than that, but we do what we have to do to keep our little green friends alive in the cold Canadian winter. In the extreme cold and short days, the geothermal energy only plays a supporting role. The wood stove and the heat pump were primary. After all, once the greenhouse is above 48 degrees Fahrenheit, or 9 degrees C temperature, the air coming out of the ground in winter Well, it would just cool the greenhouse down. There's a band of temperature in the 40s or 5 to 9 degrees C where geothermal heat is primary, and it can continue to help at any temperature below that as well. As we don't always have time to feed a wood stove, I was looking for something better, more energy efficient to a common electric space heater. Those electric space heaters can run up a big bill fast for greenhouse heat. Looking at online sales sites, I found a make-do heat pump I could afford. If you can find a house-quality used heat pump larger than mine, well, you should try to snag that before your first winter. I bought a Danby 1100 four-way portable air conditioner. These are meant to roll around in a home, maybe cooling off just one room, and it has two hoses that run out a window. Mine cost $115 US used, plus the gas to go get it. As I say in the video, you need two things. It must be a four-way unit that includes a heat pump. Most AC units do not have this ability to run backwards and provide heat, so be careful. Also, you must get the two-hose model, and I explain that in a video coming up. The heat pump draws air from within the greenhouse, possibly it's above 40 degrees Fahrenheit or 5 degrees C, and it returns much hotter air. It can heat the greenhouse up to 70 degrees on a reasonable day. The difference is cold air extracted is vented outside the greenhouse. And these units can be run just as a humidifier as well, and that's helpful in a winter greenhouse which can get wet. The heat pump also dehumidifies as part of its operation. At first mine didn't seem to work, but then I found out that the previous owner had put a plug in one of the drain hoses. When I removed that, my unit drains down into a bucket, which I have to take out and dump every now and then, but actually it's just clean water. I can put it on my plants. A heat pump will use about 20% of the energy required by an electric space heater to produce the same heat. You save 80% on the heating bill. The grow lights required to keep plants growing during the winter also help heat the greenhouse. The big bulb metal halides provide the best heat and light, but they cost a lot in electricity. LED grow lights use about 20% of the power for the same amount of light. They produce a little bit of heat, but not a lot. In a severe cold weather, I turned on my grow lights around 2 a.m. in the morning to best use their heat when I needed it. With all this, I got through the first winter with all the plants alive and did a bit better in the second winter. In this third winter of 2019-2020, we had unusually mild weather until January the 10th. I kept a collection of salad plants going with just geothermal heat right into January. I was surprised. Sometimes geothermal heat can capitalize on global warming, unfortunately. Then we had warning that a polar vortex was arriving in a few days. Because I was super busy with my weekly radio show and preparing this course, I chose to move those plants to a heated sun porch and let the greenhouse freeze up for the first time since I built it, probably until mid-February. That's when the light returns and killer cold is far less likely. I will put out trays of young plants then, seated in the house, and the cycle begins all over again. It is time to go to the videos recorded during that first winter trial.
Hello boys and girls, I'm going to be putting this Camp Chef camp stove, very pleased with it, well made, but I'm going to stick it in this corner of the greenhouse. I don't have much room for it. It'll be happy down there and safe because it's got concrete block walls on both sides and just gravel and stone down below it, so no fire risk there. But where the problem comes is as I go up past this woodwork, that will put the woodwork too close to the stovepipe. Now you can see at the top there I've got a piece of plastic. I'm going to take that out and put in plywood so I can put a stovepipe right through with the proper type of collar that will separate it from the plywood and all that sort of thing. But right now I'm just concerned with the heat from the stovepipe being too close to this wall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a type of cement board called backing board on this wall and here, and it will protect things like this switch and that cable, but it'll also just protect the wood in case there's a flame out in the pipe, or just the pipe gets really hot and might make a problem and be a fire risk. I've got a bit of an update and report on you. The greenhouse is total chaos in here because it's just snowed outside. There's quite a heavy dump of snow. And so I had to bring a bunch of things inside the greenhouse just as I wrap things up and get ready for the really cold weather that's coming. The plants are doing all right. They're not really growing much, and that's because there isn't enough heat in here. There's plenty of light for them, and they don't freeze. The temperature in this greenhouse went down to about 40 degrees. That would be Fahrenheit, and that's well above freezing. Freezing is 32 in Fahrenheit, so it's 8 degrees above freezing in Fahrenheit. And right now it's 28 degrees Fahrenheit out there, -2 Celsius, and yeah, so it's about 5 degrees Celsius inside. That's pretty good, and that's all just running this one little geothermal fan that draws far less than an amp. I'm drawing about half an amp because I've got it on half power. You can see there's a lot of condensation on the glass, and again, that's because it isn't warm enough in here. Now when I have some larger grow lights running, they're going to create some heat. They'll also dry things out. I think I'll have less of a problem of condensation. It's not dripping on me. Now you'll notice there is some snow and ice on the roof, and once I get it warmer in here with the wood stove, and that's really what this video is about, the preparation to install a little wood stove. But to get a heavy snow dump off there, I think the ice will run off just fine from the heat in here, but I want to get the heavy snow off so the light gets through. I will be using one of these. Let's see if I can get this in the shot. It's just a wood pole with a rubber flange on the edge of it. Got it at Home Depot for 20 bucks, and I think it's used by janitors to push water across a floor if you get a major water leak or something like that. But it's going to be good for the glass. I mean, you could use a garden hoe or something to pull the snow off the roof glass, but you don't want to do that because, well, you might break the glass if it's a nice cold day and you got old glass like I do. I think this rubber will be much nicer for it. Okay, so I'm going to get the snow off with that, and this is a Camp Chef stove, a tent heater. It's meant to heat tents, large tents, for people who go camping. I see there is a little water dripping on it, condensation from the roof, but once I get the temperature up in here with this stove, that won't happen. So my temperature last night, it's currently 41 degrees Fahrenheit in here, I see, was entirely maintained by this little fan and geothermal heat coming up from the ground. I do have an electric heater in here for emergencies, but you can see it's on a little plug. I bought 2 of these plugs from Amazon again. Let's see what are they called? They're called thermocubes. And what they do is they turn the temperature on, they turn the electricity on at 35 degrees. Farmers use this for keeping their troughs from freezing, or they've got some kind of heater. It comes on at 35 degrees Fahrenheit and off at 45 degrees Fahrenheit. So if the temperature in this greenhouse drops to 35 degrees, this electric heater will come on and it will keep running until the temperature in this greenhouse reaches 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and then it will turn off, and it won't come back on again at 42 or at 40. It'll only come back on if it gets down to 35 again. So this is a great tool, and this allows me to know, since I checked my minimum high-low temperatures in the greenhouse last night, it never got below 40 in this greenhouse. So I know this heater, this backup emergency electric heater, never came on last night. So that's nice to know. The geothermal did it all by itself just for the cost of running the fan. Now, this heater, wood stove, I've had it outside, tried it out, burned the first layer of paint off it. I think it will still stink the next 2 or 3 times I use it, but I saw a lot of paint fumes coming off it when I got a good hot fire going on it first time. You must do that. Don't try burning it in your greenhouse. All this pipe came with the stove, plus another length. I think there's 10 feet of pipe comes with it. Okay? So it starts off at the stove at 5 inches wide, and it flares slowly as it goes up with that pipe to be 6 inches wide at the top. Now, of course, the stovepipe can't come anywhere near the plywood or I will have quite a fire. So I'm going to be installing one of these, which is a roof cap, let's call it. It will hold the pipe in the center well away from a larger hole cut out of the plywood. So that's the plan for that. Now, it's interesting because 6-inch pipe, I couldn't find one of these at all for a 6-inch pipe. So what I had to do, this is a 7-inch hole, allegedly, very close to 7 inches, and that actually is made for a gas chimney, I'm told. I went through a supplier who can sort all these things out, and he figured out that this would hold a 7-inch pipe. So I've got 6-inch, but I got to go to 7-inch. Well, this is a converter. It's a converter, 6 inches at one end, 7 inches at the other. So that I will put on top of this 6-inch pipe. That will make it 7-inch, and then I've got a piece of 7-inch stovepipe there. Now this is single piece metal stovepipe. It's the cheapest you can buy. If I'd had another $300 to $400, I would have bought a piece of double insulated pipe for the outside, and if you can afford it, I recommend that. I just couldn't afford it, so I'm going the poor man's route here with single piece pipe. So knowing that, what you have to do is a couple of times a winter at least, you have to keep track of it, climb up on the roof and use one of these to go up and down the pipe and clean it out and get the creosote out of there. It will fall back down into the stove, and since this is a straight pipe just right into the stove, I can put a little bucket under there in the stove to catch it. You have to let your stove go out to do this. Then I'll assemble one of these. I'll pull it tight around the pipe. It's called a storm collar. Comes with, and that will stop any rain from dripping back down the pipe right into my greenhouse. So a storm collar is a good idea. And then on top of it all goes this, which is just a chimney cap. So the purpose of this is to try and get my temperature up from the about 45 to 47 degrees that I'm getting out of the geothermal system, and that's the max that it can give me, up to 65 or 70 degrees that I need to actually make plants grow. And I can do that with this little wood stove that's now covered with tools. I fired it up, and yes indeed I can get this whole greenhouse nice and warm, but I don't want to be a slave to feeding that fire all the time, and sometimes we have to go out of town to visit with children and things like that. So what have we got here? We've got a Danby Premier 4-in-1 dual hose air conditioner. So some of those words are important when you're looking for something like this. I could never afford this new. It was like, I don't know, $750 in Canada, maybe a bit cheaper in the States. And you have to watch out because this is the Danby 11,000. It's 11,000 BTUs cooling and about 10,000 BTUs heating, which is quite a bit. But they make several models called the 11,000, and some of them have single hoses and some of them have no heat pump built into them. So the heat pumps really, they sort of reverse the air conditioning and chuck the cold air out and pump the hot air into this little room. So the dual hose is absolutely key for any installation, whether you want it for AC or whatever you want it for, because the single hose pumps about 30% of either its heating, if you want it for heating, or its cooling, if you want it for cooling, back outside, and it's wasted. And it's even possible you can come into certain conditions, according to another YouTube video that I saw, where your AC just won't cool down, something like a grow room, because it's just exporting so much of its own product that it never does catch up. So this thing's quite heavy. Two people lift it. One person can kind of move it around a bit, but really getting it in the greenhouse took two people. And it comes with all those hoses and connections to put it through a window. In my case, my exit pipe, exhaust pipe, is just going through the wall, and I've got a fitting on the outside to hold on to that. Danby does give you the idea for a continuous drain on this thing, and they let you, the fitting will hold a garden hose, so I just stuck part of an old garden hose that was leaking onto there, and it goes down into a bucket. And there's a second drain right down at the bottom there, which is involved for heating, and the heater produces some water and the drain comes out there. That'll also go in the bucket, and I'll have to empty the bucket from time to time when this is working. I tried the heater, and wow, first of all, it was about 47 degrees in here. I turned the heater on. For about 2 minutes nothing happened, and then the heating came on. You have to open these flaps and heat comes out the top, and it was a lot of heat. And I thought, oh joy, this is going to work. This is the bomb, because most of the sites that talk about this stuff say, well, these heat pumps won't work below 45 degrees Fahrenheit. They're just not good enough. They're not like the heat pumps that are made for a house that will operate down to about 20 degrees Fahrenheit, or, you know, -5 degrees C. So, but I could guarantee from this pipe coming out of Geothermal that it would never drop below 45 degrees. So I could just take the input pipe, put an extension on it, run it over here, plug it in here, shut this one off, make sure this is drawing from my 8-foot deep pipes, and it will get at the very coldest 45 degree input air, and likely most of the year air above that. Watching YouTube videos, particularly MHB Gardner, I believe it was, very handy piece about how he doubled up the top part of his stovepipe, and he did it in order to get more heat up there. It makes it easier to light the fire, and it should greatly reduce the creosote that would form, because what happens is you have hot gases coming up inside. It's all nice and hot. If it's -20 or something below outside, what happens is it quickly cools and condenses on the sides of your pipe, and either drips outside the pipe from off of that little hat, or down back into your stove. Either way, you don't want a lot of creosote. Now, if I had more money, I would spend another $350 and buy insulated double-walled pipe for the outside. And if you're starting to do this and you have the money, please do that. I think you'll get a better burn and you'll get less creosote. But I don't have that money. So what I'm going to do, that 7-inch pipe that's up there, this is a 24-inch hunk of 8-inch stovepipe. And I'm going to just wrap it around the pipe up above, and then above that I will put this 8-inch to 7-inch connector piece. So that will bring my 8-inch pipe tight to the 7-inch chimney up there, and I can put a little bit more silicone around there. So that's going to make this outer piece tight, and it'll be about ½ an inch away from the pipe all the way around. It'll be held that distance. Alright, there's the finished project. So now what you're looking at is an 8-inch stovepipe with a 7-inch stovepipe inside it. When it gets to be 20 below C, or even 25 or 30 below Fahrenheit, there's no way you can keep a little glass building warm without expending tremendous amounts of energy. I don't care how good your thermal curtains are on the inside. So what I'm doing is I'm making a compromise here. I'm making exterior shutters that can go all the way around the outside of the building. They've got a couple of handles on them, as you can see. They're insulated. I'm going to show you in a minute how I make them. And I'll put them on when it's super cold in the winter. A couple of them I'm going to leave on where I don't have stuff growing in this end of this greenhouse at this time. So I'll just put them on, leave them on for the winter. it doesn't matter that much because, as you can see, it's very overcast out. There's not a lot of light here. The light that my plants are getting are from the fluorescents that are in there, and later I'll put in an LED 1000-watt light, so I can provide the lights. It's the heat and the cold that matter. Now I'll use these shutters again in the summertime on this west side of the greenhouse when it's like 40 above C or 105 in the shade, and I've just got to stop some of the sun from blasting in the later part of the day. I'll just take these shutters out and slide them on.